Boa noite a todos, sejam muito bem-vindos. Eu estou muito grata pela presença de todos vocês nesse que é o único evento no Brasil, com a presença da Audrey Tang, ex-ministra de Assuntos Digitais do Taiwan e também primeira ministra transgênero do mundo, e com a presença do economista Glen Weyl, que é o fundador do Colaboratório de Tecnologias Plurais na Microsoft, e de muitas outras iniciativas que a gente vai ouvir hoje. Eu queria começar, primeiro, agradecendo a todas as pessoas e instituições que tornaram esse evento possível. Foi um baita esforço, teve muita dedicação, então a gente está realmente muito gratos de poder fazer esse momento acontecer, começando pelo Ibmec, que está nos recebendo hoje, passando pelo ITS Rio, que está aqui representado pelo Marco Konopak, e também o Wilson Center for Brazil Studies, representado aqui pela Natália Paiva. É um prazer maior ainda poder receber vocês junto a essas duas organizações super visionárias e parceiras. Meu nome é Paula Berman e eu vou ser a MC de vocês hoje, mas eu também sou diretora de uma organização que se chama RadicalxChange. E para abrir esse evento, eu queria falar um pouquinho para vocês sobre a relevância dessas ideias que a gente vai discutir hoje e também o contexto de onde elas vieram. Então, a RadicalxChange é uma organização sem fins lucrativos, baseada nos Estados Unidos, que foi criada após o lançamento de um livro chamado Mercados Radicais. E esse livro foi coautorado pelo Glen Weyl, junto com Eric Posner, e ele tinha uma série de propostas bem inovadoras sobre como melhorar algumas das instituições que funcionam como pilares da nossa política, como o voto e o financiamento de bens públicos, e também da nossa economia, como sistema de propriedade privada. E a ideia era trazer para o cerne dessas instituições tanto a legitimidade da democracia quanto o dinamismo do mercado. E demonstrar de forma bem concreta que existem possibilidades institucionais muito ricas para além do Estado puro ou do mercado puro. Então, para mencionar algumas delas, o voto quadrático é um sistema que permite com que minorias consigam eleger suas prioridades de forma legítima e democrática. Então, geralmente, no voto tradicional, a maioria vence, as minorias não conseguem fazer valer os seus direitos, e a gente tem vários mecanismos para contornar essa limitação. No Brasil, muitas vezes, os direitos das minorias são legislados pelo judiciário, mas esse é um sistema que permite com que minorias façam valer seus direitos diretamente através do voto. Outro exemplo é o financiamento quadrático, que também nasceu a partir desse livro e que ele traz a possibilidade de integrar o apoio de iniciativas privadas e governamentais e da sociedade civil para sustentar bens públicos. E não é exagero dizer que esse conjunto de ideias trouxe um verdadeiro salto evolutivo para a ciência do fazer democrático. E a nossa organização foi criada para fomentar a experimentação e pesquisa sobre as ideias que estavam contidas nesse livro. Mas hoje a gente já compartilha essa missão com dezenas de organizações ao redor do mundo. O ITS Rio e o Wilson Center são algumas delas. O livro foi lançado em 2018 e gerou um grande movimento que conta com líderes de todas as esferas da sociedade que são muito dedicados a colocar essas ideias em prática. Então, nos últimos 6 anos, esse movimento já conseguiu gerar uma onda de experimentação institucional, com sistemas de voto quadrático sendo pilotados por governos em todo o mundo, no Taiwan, como a Audrey vai comentar com vocês, nos Estados Unidos, no Colorado, no Harlem, em Nova York, e também me orgulha muito dizer que aqui no Brasil, com nós da RadicalxChange, junto com o ITS Rio, encabeçando uma série de experimentos, desde pilotos das favelas do Rio de Janeiro até votações internas de câmaras municipais de cidades brasileiras. Outro exemplo de algumas dessas conquistas, e eu vou tentar ser breve aqui também, porque eles vão contar muito mais, mas é que sistemas de financiamento quadrático mudaram para sempre a forma como bens públicos digitais e software de código aberto são financiados. e sistemas de propriedade parcial comum são utilizados para licenciar a arte de alguns dos mais influentes artistas contemporâneos do mundo. Aos poucos, essa série de metodologias específicas foram formando um novo campo de pesquisa, experimentação, e dando forma a uma visão transformadora para o futuro da democracia e da tecnologia. Essa visão se chama Pluralidade e propõe que a comparação entre aqueles que mais divergem entre si é justamente onde se encontra a chave não só da democracia e da liberdade, mas de toda a vida, beleza e complexidade na sociedade humanas e na natureza. E foi justamente em uma das democracias mais vulneráveis do mundo, o Taiwan, que essa visão se tornou realidade e floresceu. O Taiwan ele mostra que o futuro da democracia e da tecnologia podem oferecer muito mais do que a gente tem hoje, do que a gente vê hoje. E por isso é tão especial poder ter a Audrey conosco. A Audrey e o Glen escreveram um livro para contar essa história. E eles escreveram esse livro de forma aberta, junto com centenas de colaboradores online. Ele está disponível gratuitamente para todos que quiserem ler, em um site chamado plurality.net, que depois a gente também vai colocar aqui. Pode escanear o QR Code. E esse livro também está à venda na amazon.com.br, para quem quer ter o livro físico mesmo. E eles estão no Brasil hoje como parte de uma tour que eles estão fazendo ao redor de todo mundo para divulgar essa mensagem e também para convidar todos a participar dessa construção. Esse livro é um projeto contínuo, ele segue aberto para colaborações, então todos vocês são convidados a ser coautores. E a última coisa que eu vou dizer é que esse livro ele vem em um momento crítico, onde tecnologias transformadoras trazem riscos consideráveis para as nossas instituições e comunidades. E nos próximos anos, a gente tem uma janela de oportunidade para nos mobilizarmos e para tentar retraçar o curso em direção ao desenvolvimento tecnológico focado em fomentar relacionamentos, curiosidade e cooperação, e em direção a uma democracia digital onde grupos diversos, com visões divergentes, possam colaborar para impulsionar a nossa sociedade como um todo. A gente já sabe que isso é possível, porque o Taiwan já mostrou, e o livro Plurality oferece um mapa que vai ser apresentado hoje e que pode nos ajudar. Mas esse mapa ele é incompleto e vai precisar de todos nós para ser traçado. Então, com esse convite, eu passo a palavra para a Natália de Paiva, do Wilson Center for Brazil Studies, e ela também vai fazer uma breve introdução. Em seguida, a gente vai ter uma apresentação do Glen e depois um painel com a Audrey. Obrigada.
Boa tarde, pessoal. Boa noite, né, agora. Vou ser o mais breve possível, porque, assim como vocês, eu quero escutar Audrey e Glen. Mas vou me apresentar, né? Meu nome é Natália Paiva. Eu estou aqui representando o Wilson Center, do qual eu sou Global Fellow do Brazil Institute. Além disso, eu tenho uma consultoria chamada Alandar, com foco em políticas públicas e tecnologia. É uma consultoria que tem um foco muito em Trust and Safety, que é basicamente a gente pensar em mitigar todos os riscos e danos que a tecnologia, né, pode causar. A gente atua com grandes players globais com operação no Brasil, e por isso que é especialmente mais revigorante escutar tanto as ideias da Audrey como do Glen, porque eles nos trazem, né, um outro momento da internet onde havia muito mais otimismo, porque havia muito mais caminhos positivos possíveis. E acho que está na hora de a gente retomar essa agenda, né? Então, falando um pouquinho sobre o Wilson Center, né, ele foi estabelecido pelo Congresso dos Estados Unidos em 1968 e é um think tank de políticas públicas independente e apartidário que discute formas de enfrentar questões globais muito por meio da pesquisa independente e do diálogo aberto, que é exatamente o que a gente está fazendo aqui, né? O Brazil Institute foi criado, né, como um braço dentro do Wilson Center e é o único think tank global com foco no Brasil, sediado nos Estados Unidos, né? Para cumprir essa missão do Wilson Center e do Brazil Institute, vários seminários e diálogos são realizados, como esse, em parceria com o RadicalxChange, com o ITS. Inclusive, a Bruna Santos, que hoje dirige o Wilson Center, o Brazil Institute do Wilson Center, já trouxe tanto a Audrey como o Glen no Brasil, para diálogos no Brasil há 2, 3 anos, e eu acho que é super importante, assim, né? Era um momento no qual o mundo inteiro vivia pandemia, e todo mundo estava lidando aqui no Brasil com uma série de desafios, né? Tanto os relacionados ao Covid-19, mas principalmente os relacionados a ameaças democráticas, antidemocráticas. Né? Mas receber a Audrey e o Glen nesse momento tem um timing especial, né? Ainda mais precioso. Né? O Brasil ele tem um histórico, né, de experiências colaborativas de inovação democrática, do qual a gente deve se orgulhar. Né? Todo mundo sabe do orçamento participativo, todo mundo sabe o que foi a Constituição de 1988. E imagina só, no Correio foram distribuídos 5 milhões de papéis para as pessoas fazerem suas contribuições para a Constituição. Né? Mais de 72 mil sugestões foram enviadas por Correios nos anos 80. Né? Então, imagina o tipo de inovação que a gente estava tendo naquela época. E não parou por aí. Também, quando a gente vem em direitos digitais, a gente deve ter muito orgulho do Marco Civil da Internet, não só pela boa legislação, bom marco civil que ele mas também pela maneira como ele foi criado, de maneira super aberta e colaborativa. Também a LGPD, né, que bebe muito do GDPR, também é uma inovação super importante e alinhada com as melhores práticas de direitos digitais. Mas esse time ele é especial agora porque a gente está vendo uma espécie de retrocesso nesse sentido. Né? O legado que a pandemia deixou no nosso Congresso foi cruel. Né? A gente vê cada vez menos audiências públicas, menos debate, e a gente vê um reverso, né, de toda essa participação que houve no passado. Né? Então, a gente está discutindo temas grandiosos como governança de inteligência artificial a toque de caixa, sem debate público, sem pluralidade de vozes. Né? Então, esse momento é especialmente importante. Né? A gente sabe que essas regulamentações apressadas não dão conta, né, de todo o desafio que a gente tem, mas, mais do que tudo, né, a gente está vendo que a gente está andando para trás no que tange a colaboração. Né? Então, acho que esse é um momento, e que a visita da Audrey e do Glen trazem isso, de a gente repensar, em beber de volta, né, na nossa tradição de ampla participação democrática e plural, e agora reimpulsionada, né, por outros exemplos de inovação tecnológica dentro desse jogo democrático de pluralidade que Taiwan e outros, né, podem trazer. Mas eu acho que, mais do que tudo isso, né, e a Paula falou sobre instrumentos muito concretos e reais, eu acho que muito que alguém que eu estudei semiótica, fiz um mestrado em semiótica, então a questão do léxico me pega muito. Né? Então, quando eu vejo a Audrey trazendo palavras como uma internet e estruturas digitais, enfim, que sejam compartilhadas, colaborativas, inclusivas, plurais e focadas nas pessoas, a gente vê que é de um tipo de léxico totalmente diferente do que a gente vem discutindo direitos digitais por tanto tempo. Né? E é isso que nos move, e é por isso que a gente está aqui, e é por isso que eu acho que isso aqui é o pontapé inicial de uma série de discussões, inclusive que a gente, como sociedade civil, deve voltar a ter e impulsionar os nossos legisladores para irem nesse caminho. Obrigada, Audrey, obrigada, Glen, e que seja o início dessa conversa.
Paulo, eu falo depois, né?
Verdade.
Bom, agora a gente vai passar a palavra ao Glen, para ele iniciar a apresentação dele. Se os panelistas quiserem sentar aqui na frente, a gente vai se reorganizar aqui para o Glen iniciar.
I apologize to be presenting in English. I don't know if I have a slide changer. Okay, great. Voice control. So next slide. Hi. Yeah, now it's working. Okay. Yeah, so that's loud. Okay, next slide, please. There you go. So today I'm going to be talking about a book that I wrote with Audrey, but also with a global community of about 50 people. This image shows those people blended together using AI, and then it's tiled with the individual images of the people in proportion to the amount of contribution they made to the book. I apologize for the incorrect, adjectival placement relative to the Portuguese typical, but the book is called, in English, Digital Shui Plurality, the future of collaborative technology and democracy. And it's the first, to our knowledge, fully open source, copyright-free book. All of you are very welcome to become co-authors of it. Next slide. Next slide. And it responds to the feeling that I think is quite omnipresent these days of a conflict between democracy and technology. On the one hand, it's widely seen that technology is driving polarization, the spread of mis and disinformation. At the same time, many technologists feel under attack from democracies. They feel that what they get from democracies is regulation, anger, frustration, do this, do that, often in inconsistent ways, and actually declining investment. So more and more demands, more and more frustration, no support. And from authoritarian regimes, on the other hand, they see large-scale investment in AI models, they see development of smart cities, they see a positive agenda for driving technology. And we believe that this conflict, next slide, arises from the fact that the two dominant ideologies for the future of technology, the two dominant stories we tell about it, are basically inconsistent with democratic values. On the one hand, you have what we call synthetic technocracy, which is basically the vision that there's going to be a giant AI that will do everything for us. We all get a universal basic income and enjoy the ride, which is basically anti-democratic because while it allows for some kind of economic equality, it concentrates all the power over shaping the direction of the future in a small group of people. The other vision, which we refer to as corporate libertarianism, is very much associated with people like Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen, and the crypto world. This is the vision that technology is inevitably going to destroy governments, labor unions, collective organizations of all kinds, and create sort of a hyper-capitalist world where everything is governed by, markets and so forth. And while these are the two dominant stories, we believe that actually most of the technologies that are widely used today were developed under a different paradigm. And in fact, most of the most prominent pop cultural visions of the future as well. So like Star Trek, the internet, these things really come out of a very different vision, which is much more aligned to democracy. And really what the book is about is trying to articulate what the technology is associated with this, to tell more coherently and openly the tradition around those things so that they can sort of compete in the mimetic space with these alternative anti-democratic visions that have been driving democracy and technology apart. Next slide. And at the core of that is, and this is the reason we often make the Vulcan salute, an idea from Star Trek, a Vulcan philosophy, which is called infinite diversity and infinite combinations. This is the philosophy that all beauty, truth, and progress and growth arise from the combination of the different things working together. And we associate it with three great philosophers, Hannah Arendt, Danielle Allen, and Audrey, who have manifested different elements of this. So on the one hand, Hannah Arendt used the word plurality to mean the basic condition of humanity, that there do not exist separated individuals and whole societies, but instead diverse set of intersecting social groups, allegiances to which constitute the identities of diverse individuals within a society. And we represent this with this symbol. This is a Unicode character, so you can type it on any computer with a few strokes, and yet it's one of the least commonly used, so it's not associated with any particular culture. And it's these intersection of two boxes representing this notion of different cultures intersecting and creating something. And the second idea we associate with the contemporary philosopher Danielle Allen, a professor at Harvard. And she has this idea of a connected society, that the basic way we should judge the success of a society is its ability to take the diversity and rather than allow it to be destroyed in heat and conflict, to instead channel it towards progress and growth. And we represent that by this rainbow at the intersection of the two squares. And finally, we associated with Audrey's work, and these characters, Shu Wei, which are, by the way, coming out of a font created as part of the programs they developed in Taiwan by teenagers and contributed back to the open source community. And these are in traditional Mandarin, and they mean both digital and plural at the same time. I know that sounds a little bit strange, but digits are literally your fingers, and so the idea is that what it is to be digital is to have many of something, right? And so this represents the concept that the fundamental role of digital technology is to harness the potential energy in social diversity that can turn into conflict, and use it in the same way that engines used, combustibles in the 19th century, instead as a way to produce growth and social evolution. Next slide. And this is most clearly manifest in the digital democracy in Taiwan, where they developed a number of really interesting social practices that have enabled them to become the most respected digital democracy in the world. One of these is the GovZero movement, G0V. The notion is that, government websites, I guess it would be G0B here. Is that right? V, oh, it is, okay. And in Spanish, it's B. But, so, government website are at .G0.gov. And what they did is they download the government websites, civil society actors make a better version of the public service, and upload it at .G0V. And they use that to shame the government into adopting higher quality digital services. This was so successful that Audrey was appointed as a minister for the purpose of incorporating these civil society contributions. And that proved critical during the COVID pandemic when the civil society developed mask distribution apps, developed contract tracing apps that ended up being critical to allowing them to have the lowest death rate in the world during the peak of the crisis and the second highest growth rate in the world after Guyana, which discovered oil at the time, and to do it all with no lockdowns. So by very quickly adopting at the speed of open source the innovations of the civil sector, rather than waiting for government procurement process, they were able to respond very agilely to these emergent threats. Another example of this was the vTaiwan system, which is basically a social media application. People microblog, but rather than surfacing the things that are most engaging and often most divisive, it gives you a sense for the conversation in the society. What are the different positions? And then surfaces and highlights and acts upon the things that bridge those divides. So that doesn't resolve the whole conversation, but it does allow very concrete action while also giving people a sense of the distribution of opinion that's out there. And similar systems were used by them not just to combat the pandemic, but the infodemic. This year, in January, they had their national election launching this year of elections all around the world at the same time as we're dealing with AI. But it was, according to a wide range of monitors, the freest and fairest election this year, despite having the highest degree of disinformation targeted at them for some obvious reasons. And they did it through collaborative participation in fact-checking, including very young people, the process of which not only addresses the specific disinformation, but inoculates the children's minds so that they know how the sausage is made and can apply that critical lens in the future. And the success of this shows up not just in particular programs, but in the data. So Taiwan is now the highest median at PPP income country in the world with more than 10 million people. It has about 50% of GDP coming from the exports of technology. So like the median worker in Taiwan is in a chip fab or something like this, right? And where in much of the world it's viewed that technology drives rising inequality, in Taiwan there's been steady or even slightly declining inequality over this last decade of intense digitization. And where the rest of the world has declining democracies, now in many of the indices, Taiwan is actually the most free and fair democracy in the world. Next slide. And it's only been a democracy for 35 years. And a lot of people react to this by saying, well, you know, this is a small island. They all speak Chinese. They all come from a similar ethnic background. And, you know, aren't Chinese people cooperative anyways? So this, you know, should be pretty easy, right? But if that's your reaction, you should look at this picture from 10 years ago before this work began, when the national legislature of the country was occupied not for, how many hours was it occupied here? Yeah, an evening, so maybe a couple of hours. Here in Taiwan, it was occupied for 3 weeks by students. And the ability to have those folks reach consensus, have those demands adopted by the government, and then have the party that was pushing that win the next election showed people that there was another path, and that was the launching point for all of these reforms. But even a decade after that, you have to understand this is a profoundly divided country. So I went on January 13th, the day before their presidential election, to the rallies of the two main parties. The opposition party, everyone was waving the national flag. At the government rally, the only flags that were being waved were rainbow flags, green flags, and pictures of the island. So you've got a country, or whatever you want to call this entity, where the government does not recognize the name or the flag. That's a pretty extreme division to exist in a society, and it's not just political divisions. Taiwan is the second most religiously diverse country in the world, and it's one of the only developing countries in the world where religiosity and religious observance is actually increasing rather than declining. And it has an incredibly complex ethnic and colonial history that even makes a place like Brazil look very simple, because it was only occupied by indigenous Polynesians until 1600. It was then colonized by the Dutch, and your friends, the Portuguese, spent some time there as well, gave it a name, Isla Formosa. And then the Japanese colonized it, then the Chinese colonized, the Japanese colonized it, and then they got this ambiguous, are they independent, are they what, status. So you'd think that this would lead to all kinds of social explosions, and in certain ways it does. So Audrey escaped an assassination attempt a couple of months ago. But overall, the dynamic there is that, you know, it used to be when we saw fires burning in the ground, we go to put them out. And now we drill for oil underneath them, right? And in the same way, any time we see conflict breaking out, we should also think to ourselves, you know, what is the potential to harness that energy for social progress? And that's really the idea behind Plurality, is developing systematic approaches to harnessing the potential energy that goes into social conflict to instead improve a society and push it forward. Can we play the video now? Do we have that loaded? I can give you the URL if not. They got it? Okay, so I just want to show you what this is in action visually.
Across the world, democracy is on a decline.
Authoritarianism is on the rise.
Global freedom has eroded for the 18th consecutive year.
Audrey Tang, what is your greatest hope for democracy across the globe?
That people see democracy as a social technology, something that people can construct together, that they can improve in the here and now. We can code up political systems.
The Sunflower Movement was a real turning point for Taiwan's democracy.
When the Sunflower Movement happened, I said to my colleague, I have to leave now. Democracy needs me. I brought a very long cable for internet connection. I live streamed through Twitter. Everybody saw it is possible for democracy to evolve, to come up with novel policies simply by asking the people, what should we do together? I was born with a heart defect, and one day I just fainted. I woke up in a hospital and they told me the hole in my heart has grown. I could die. This awareness that everything can be reset tomorrow reminds me of Taiwanese democracy. We can't lose our democracy just with a couple missiles.
I think there's a lot that the world can learn from Taiwan. The US is running on a 250-year-old operating system. There is a strong desire to move beyond this and properly rethink from first principles. What would democracy in the 21st century actually look like?
We can make the government more open to the public. It'll be easier for people to access the data, to analyze it, transparency.
Audrey has created the opportunity to make Taiwan the most exciting constitutional democracy in the world.
I think it's a very critical moment. China really wants to invade Taiwan.
You're sitting on a place that is the flashpoint if there's going to be World War III. And yet there's calm in the eye of the hurricane. And that calm, I think, emanates from all that Audrey's done.
We can become co-creators of our democratic system, reconfiguring society in a way that is more transparent, more inclusive, more fair.
Agora a gente vai fazer mais uma apresentação, vai ser bem breve também, mas vai ser do Marco Konopak, que está aqui representando o ITS Rio, e a ideia é compartilhar um pouco, ele vai fazer essa apresentação em inglês, então quem quiser pode pegar o fone para tradução, e a ideia é compartilhar um pouco do que está sendo feito no Brasil, em termos de participação, democracia digital, e aí em seguida a gente vai ter uma conversa que em seguida vai ser aberta também para perguntas e respostas.
Boa noite, pessoal. Meu nome é Marco Konopak e, na verdade, eu vou fazer uma apresentação muito breve, de 5 minutos, só para fazer uma provocação para a Audrey e para o Glen, para a gente seguir essa conversa, tá? Eu escrevi a minha fala, até porque eu sou uma pessoa prolixa, então arriscaria a gente começar falando de democracia digital e terminar debatendo Star Trek e sentido da vida, alguma coisa assim. Então, eu vou para deixar minha fala bem nos trilhos, eu vou lê-la, a que eu preparei aqui, tá? I'll exchange to English right now. On behalf of the Institute of Technology and Society, I would like to thank all the organizations that made this event possible: RadicalxChange, Woodrow Wilson Center, Brazil Institute, and the Ibmec for hosting us today. And such an honor to have you here, Audrey and Glen. I'd like to thank you, Audrey Tang and Glen Weyl, for coming to Brazil and sharing the inspirational thoughts presenting their book, Plurality. We are thrilled to have you here. Ronaldo Lemos, including the ITS director, shared this excitement, telling everyone in an article published today in one of the most important journals of Brazil, Folha de São Paulo, that you are here. And we are very excited to have this moment of you here. So I also want to thank you, everyone attending this conference and our online audience. Actually, we don't have online audience, but we are recording everything. So in the future we will have, so we can pretend that you have an online audience right now. So I'm Marco Konopak, and I'm honored to be here to discuss the future of collaborative technology and democracy. My journey in this field started with deep interest in participatory practice. I first became involved in this area in 2005. While participating in this World Social Forum meetings. And for my PhD dissertation, which the title is Collective Intelligence and Democracy, a theoretical model to analyze crowd law applied to participatory process in 6 countries, I study how technology can empower citizens and enhance democratic process. One of the inspiring cases study was via Taiwan. Brazil has a rich history of participatory practices. The participatory budgeting movement in Porto Alegre, starting in the 80s, brought citizens to the table to decide how public funds should be allocated. However, it was the creation of the Marco Civil da Internet, the Internet Bill of Rights of Brazil in 2010, that truly marked, and actually I have to mention to Gui Almeida, one of the, and Paulo Renat, one of the members of the Legislative Affairs Secretary that started the movement of public consultation on Marco Civil da Internet are here. In 2010, that truly marked as a leader in digital democracy, Brazilian digital democracy. This groundbreaking law was the result of the first large-scale digital public consultation, which harnessed the power of the internet to gather diverse perspectives and input from a wide range of stakeholders. The Marco Civil Internet consultation was a watershed moment for Brazilian democracy. It demonstrated that citizens could be actively involved in shaping crucial legislation, creating a more inclusive and accountable system of governance. The Marco Civil Internet, widely considered a model for internet regulation worldwide, embodied the values of transparency, participation, and collaboration that are central to plurality. Unfortunately, this promising trend has been severely undermined in recent years. The authoritarian governments we had since 2016 has systematically dismantled democratic institutions and attacked participatory practices. Notably, public policy councils, which were the basis of participatory structure in Brazil, were dismantled. This represented a dangerous regression, a step backward for Brazilian democracy. It's crucial to understand the roles of government, civil society, and other sectors, in short, the role of multi-stakeholderism in supporting open and participatory processes. One of the biggest challenges facing political science today is how to create initiatives that transcend governments and authoritarian tendencies. In this sense, civil society emerged as a beacon of hope. And I was touched by the sunflower movement that we started back in 2014. So here in Brazil, we are working to build a more plural and inclusive future for technology and democracy. The Institute for Technology and Society is responsible for remarkable projects such as Mudamos, We Change, which was the first mobile app to implement self-recognizable signatures based on blockchain. This app was downloaded for more than 800,000 users and was responsive to public petitions to present popular laws to legislative councils. And other initiative that implemented quadratic vote is Concordamos, which has been used in many participatory processes that Paula mentioned before. Recently, ITS, with other partners, have launched a national public consultation on artificial intelligence. O que queremos da IA? Which stands for What We Want from AI in Brazil. This participatory process aims to find consensus to build a comprehensive legislation to regulate AI in Brazil. The challenges we face today are immense, but plurality and the growing global movement for digital democracy offer a pathway forward. We must resist the force of authoritarianism and continue to explore innovative technologies that empower citizens and strengthen democratic institutions. We need to foster utopias that could put citizenship and participation in the center of public debate. Works such as Plurality is a lighthouse to show us new directions to follow. Thank you for your work and thank you for being here in Brazil. Thank you so much.
Audrey, do you have any questions or comments in response to this presentation?
No, I think the quicker we give the floor to the questions, the better.
All right. So, se alguém tiver alguma pergunta, a gente pode começar a fazer uma conversa. Eu vou levar o microfone para quem tiver. Alguma pergunta?
Hi, it's an honor to be here. I would like to know, in your vision, Audrey, what are the most important disinformation subjects in Taiwan nowadays? If you can point out to us, they are in the plan of democracy or social media or in medical issues such as in COVID. What are your most actual worries about disinformation and fake news nowadays?
That's a great question. Yes, of course. Like in the cameras. Okay. Hello, future generations. Okay. So to your question, we do pre-bunking of disinformation, meaning that we already know what our adversaries will likely push, and we strive to deliver the messages that counter the disinformation, not after it reaches people, because then it creates room for fighting and conspiracy theory and all that. But if you make sure that people receive the clarification, it serves like inoculation. So the grand disinformation that authoritarian adversaries deliver is very simple. It's democracy only leads to chaos. It's this simple. Democracy never delivers. That is that, right? So every year, there is different variation to this theme, but the overarching theme is always that democracy only leads to chaos. So for example, when the election comes, then we already know that the polarization attack will attack the rigging of the election. They will attack the counting and dispute the numbers. We don't even have to do a survey. We already know that's going to be the case. So in Taiwan, in the January election, we very meticulously invited all the three parties and non-partisan people to witness the counting of paper-only ballot. So for each ballot we take out, we show it to 3 different angles. There's people using high-definition cameras or phones to capture every moment, so that when right after the election, well, predictably, there are polarization and disinformation attacks about the counting process. Whatever they dispute, we can find 3 different YouTubers from different parties in that counting station having the full document showing that it's not the case. It was a deep fake or was a cheap fake. There's both deep fake and cheap fake in those attacks. But within 24 hours, all the party leaders came out and say, oh, we looked at the documents that our YouTubers made, and there is no such rigging. That must be a polarization attack. And so although it could have gone viral, it did not go viral because people participated in the counting processes before, right? So many examples like that, like when deepfake was not even a thing 2 years ago, I deepfaked myself and show it on national television and showed people how deepfake is made. And I say, in 2 years, this is coming, right? And so again, it pre-bunked people. Or for example, during the pandemic, we already know there will be an anti-vax attack. So we showed a scoreboard of what age brackets of people prefer, what brands of vaccine. So there are people are like, oh, I will never get the Medigen vaccine produced by Taiwanese. I will always wait for Moderna. Or there are people who say AstraZeneca kill old people. I will only have BNT or something like that. I got all 4 vaccines just to make a point. But anyway, so by publishing this scoreboard, it turned the conflict into my vaccine is better than your vaccine. But there is no team, no vaccine. So there's no anti-vax faction throughout the 2 years in Taiwan, and everybody got vaccinated. So again and again, the lesson is if you pre-bunk, then people have in their mind a little bit of mRNA of that disinformation, but they grow antibodies and they become immune to that. That is the main idea.
Mais alguém tem alguma pergunta?
Hello, Glenn and Audrey. Thank you for coming to explain your brilliant book to us. I would like to know how you guys think we can improve the popular participation on democracy discussions and policies.
So in the book, on the part 5, there is this map. Yes, well, thank you. Yeah, where it shows a frontier from like a few people, but very intimately collaborating, to a lot of people, but you can only vote or even just have a transaction in money, because if you have more than 10,000 people, 100,000 people, then it's very difficult to simultaneously hold a conversation with that many people. So it was always framed as a trade-off. You either go deep in your conversation and listening, or you go broad, but then you don't listen very well. That is the old trade-off. But the idea of plurality is, instead of seeing it as a trade-off, see it in 2 dimensions, so that we can develop technologies that make sure that people can work with the same amount of people, but deeper. For example, through automated translation that translates not just language, but also nonverbal expressions, also culture and things like that, so that people can just speak to WhatsApp or speak to the phone and so on, and still have the full nuance captured with the same number of people, but much, much more deeper, right? So this is one direction. Another direction is to work with the same amount of depthness, for example, deliberation, but augment the ability for facilitators. I was trained as a facilitator. I can facilitate about this number of people in the room. But if you double the number, it becomes very hard for me. Triple the number, it becomes impossible for me to hold each person's theory of mind in my mental model. But now, with a lot of new technologies, we can actually get 450 people talking simultaneously in rooms of 10, and with no facilitator, with just robotic facilitator that automatically summarizes with nuance, showing a group picture like a selfie to the people that is having the discussion of where people are standing in. And the best thing is that all these technologies, they cost very little now. Almost free software, like Talk to the City, they're free software now. So you can then take the same depth of conversation, but scale it to 10 times more people. So develop a little bit more deeply, but with the same number of people, or develop with the same depth, but with a little bit more people. These 2 directions are making no trade-offs in this depthness or the breadthness idea. So the plurality research direction is to refuse to make trade-offs and always make improvements on the depth or the breadth. It's a little bit harder to improve both at the same time, mostly because people will find it unfamiliar. So making small improvements gradually, this way, like a zigzag, is often easier, because then people can relate it to the previous consultation or previous engagement.
Você tinha mais uma pergunta?
Thanks a lot, Audrey and Glenn. It's an honor to be here and to hear you both, your experience. And my point, and I would like to explore a little bit more about the concept of vaccination to work against the disinformation. My point is, here in Brazil, the vote is mandatory. So the authoritarian discourse, they use the social media, and a lot of the main part, or great part of the population in Brazil have cell phones, even if they are from the most vulnerable groups of the society. But they don't have the education to interpret and to analyze information that they receive. So they are connected, and they are vulnerable to receive a lot of disinformation. So they are being educated with disinformation.
And the situation is we have elections. Elections are mandatory. Great part of the voters are from vulnerable groups, and they are being educated with disinformation against democracy. So how to the idea of vaccination is very interesting. But my point, and I'm sorry, but I just would like to explore and to know a little bit more how to reach these young people, all these groups, because there are a lot of initiatives here in Brazil. For instance, the formal media groups, they have groups like fake or real news, but the young people, they don't access formal media groups or the channels. They receive information from WhatsApp groups or from social media like X Twitter. And we know that there are a lot of questions here in Brazil to discuss how these groups are and the social medias are facilitating disinformation. No? So my point is, I would like to know how you in Taiwan, what you did in order to reach these people and to work against disinformation and changing, no, and re-educating them against disinformation.
That's a great question. Especially in Taiwan, we have something called Line, which is a super app and that offers end-to-end encryption, just like Signal or WhatsApp. And in such groups, it's impossible for anyone outside of the group to know what's going on, right? In X.com, at least, you can have community nodes and things like that because it's semi-public. But in closed end-to-end encrypted groups, there really is no way to know what's going on. So in Taiwan, starting 2016, the GovZero community developed a system called co-facts, or collaborative fact-checking. And co-facts works as like a spam filter would work. So in your email, sometimes people would flag something as spam, saying to the world that this email comes unsolicited. So co-facts initially work the same. It's a chatbot that you can forward any message to it and saying, oh, it's probably disinformation. I don't know, but it's probably disinformation. And what this chatbot did is that it anonymizes the source, but it posts the most viral information that many people flag, just like anti-spam, into a dashboard so that people can know what is currently going viral. And anyone can type to offer more context, just like community notes, into those viral disinformation. Now, in Taiwan, we also have antivirus companies like Trend Micro is very famous, or Google Look, which is our new unicorn. So they took this open source database and they improved on it. They made chatbots that you can invite into your family chat group. And so it automatically scans each and every link, each and every message against the sophisticated contextualization database. And so it can immediately say, oh, this is not entirely true. It is also that you probably want to know this context. And so people don't have to trust the government. People don't have to trust the media. People only have to trust themselves or the open source code that they can audit. And there are many, many, many chatbots like this that you can invite to your private chat groups. And so that program also spread to Thailand. So if you type co-fact without the S, co-fact, then you go to the Thailand version of the same system. And so far, it's proving to be very popular. Now, this year, we even have seen the co-facts group. They train their own use of language model, AI model, so that even before anyone debunk the disinformation, a AI chatbot automatically debunks it based on the similarities of that angle compared to the previous angles. So they don't have to be very similar in text, even if they're very different in text, but very similar in the angle, in the semantics. It knows that it's this thing again, so it can debunk it. And it also works through the antivirus companies against fraud, against phishing, against many other cyber attacks. So it becomes a general purpose tool that people would just invite to their chat rooms. So a lot of it is open source, and I think it can be deployed in WhatsApp as well. So I would encourage you to reach out and maybe understand how Thailand or other countries have been adapting the COVAX system. And once you know what's trending in those closed groups, Twitter or Facebook is no problem at all because the toxic disinformation always try in closed groups first. And if you solve that, you solve everything.
There's a couple of other things that I would just add. One is that there are almost no communities where there's nothing maintaining the social fabric. People cannot live in isolation. People die. So many poor communities, many isolated communities, religion plays a critical role. And there are pluses and minuses of every institution in society, including religion. But in societies where religion is a critical glue to a community, working with those religious communities can be very powerful. And they're just as terrified, whether they be evangelical, whether they be Catholic, of the way in which these divisiveness is tearing apart their communities as well. And they can be a powerful, they are a powerful source of education. I mean, people are studying every Sunday in many of these places about how to love their neighbor. And whether you think religion is positive or negative study, I mean, there are lessons in that book about peacemaking. There are lessons in that book about neighbor and love. And if you can harness that, if you can say that this is part of that, it's part of holding a religious community together, that learning that comes from that carries over to many other areas of life. So I would really encourage that. Second thing I would say is some of these communities, literacy is not perfect, literal literacy. And there are ways to adopt these technologies to those contexts. There are voice-based internets with AI backends that enable many of the same features, but using oral interfaces. There are ways to do it with feature phones, not just smartphones. So thinking creatively about all these different contexts and being in touch with what is serving that social glue function, even if it's not the same thing as in Taiwan, I think that's very important.
Okay.
We can start a hip hop battle here, so. Audrey, moving subjects and talking more about free software and how the Gulf Zero movement started in Taiwan. We used to have here in Brazil a very flourishing community on free software. So we started one of the most important forums of free software here in Brazil, in Porto Alegre, the Free Software International Forum. And many of these movements were connected to the government, and many companies started in this movement, also providing softwares to the government. And I was highlighting and remarking what you said in Plurality about the decline of the investment of governments in R&D in comparison with the growing up R&D investment of the private sector. So, and we started today an interesting discussion in a WhatsApp group when we share how you in Taiwan could start softwares to facilitate the consensus among people. And someone, in a point of the discussion, said, but it's dangerous to have AI and algorithms mediating the social relationship. So how the decision will be made in that way. And getting back, when we talk about free software, that we can say what is in the code, what's in the algorithm, it makes it more safe to create this mediatization among social relationships. And otherwise, when we talk about private sector making great AI models that we don't know how it goes and for which path they are following, it starts to be a digital sovereign issue that can be very threatening to many countries such as Brazil. In Brazil recently, we have a decline to the free softwares running in the government structure. And from 2016, we saw a growing domain of the big techs in the government software solutions that many of the public servants that are here in the audience saying that, like Microsoft and Google dominating all the infrastructure. So how do you and Glenn see this domination and this decline of the R&D investment of governments, in this case of AI and social mediation of relationships?
Yeah, in Taiwan, we have been having open document format and open API and all that, right, for more than a decade now. It is considered standard. We have our own LibreOffice fork that we maintain as part of the Ministry of Digital Affairs. That being said, there are ministries and units that use Google Doc, and we are not against Google Doc as long as it exports and imports open document and can interoperate with the rest of the technical stack. So we're not against Google, so to speak, but we must hold them to account so that their data centers are physically in Taiwan. So Google does that, Microsoft does that. Next Q1, Amazon will do that, so that when the subsea cables are cut, it still runs in the Taiwan soil. And we never go to the same vendor for two adjacent layers. So if you do like your device management with one software, you cannot use biometric in the same vendor because they're adjacent layers in cybersecurity. So preferably all three layers in zero trust architecture, the identification of biometric, the device, and the behavior are all free software. But even if some of them are proprietary, it never goes to two adjacent layers, because if they do, then they never speak open protocol. It always speaks proprietary protocol. And when they do that, you cannot switch it around anymore. Next procurement cycle, what they lose on this layer, they will raise price on the other layer and you become hostage. So we ensure that even when in domains where no free software solutions yet exist, we insist on open interoperable standards among three proprietary vendors. And then later on, you can switch into free software because they're forced to speak open standards. So this is the general shape. And this is the same for AI. Taiwan has our sovereign model, the TaiDe, the Trustworthy AI Dialogue Engine, but it's not pre-trained from scratch. It is taking the Llama 3 model and doing what we call constitutional alignment to align it with what Taiwanese people want from the AI. So we use Polis, which is a good old-fashioned AI that is easy to explain and open source, to ask people what they want the local AI to behave. And we also have face-to-face discussions in Taipei and in Tainan. And so all in all, it creates this constitutional document, which is a little bit misleading. I want to say the code of conduct for AI. And then we aligned Llama to this constitutional document so that it behaves in a way that fits the Taiwanese norm. Now, this alignment assembly is using democracy to align AI, but the result of that, a better AI, can also be used to facilitate. So it also enhances democracy. And if it doesn't work, or if it works with bias and so on, because the entire pipeline of Talk to the City is open. So people can replicate that very easily and also steer it with the bias correction. So my point is that it's not perfect in any given time, but if you have a good feedback loop, if you can see the bias in the AI models and then steer it with the people's input regularly, then it's not just hitting the brake or the pedal or the brake or the pedal. It is actually steering AI toward where people want, is a democratic alignment of AI. So this technique we at Collective Intelligence Project at CIP pioneered with OpenAI and Anthropic. But now with Hugging Face and with many other vendors, it's now an open source pipeline. Anyone can use it now.
Natalia.
Yes, just a quick question that maybe not that quick actually, but you've been traveling throughout the world to talk with groups like these, and after years of techno-pessimism, what I can think is that most of times people will say, well, what you're saying, it's incredible and it's inspiring, but it wouldn't work at my country because X, Y, and Z. So in Brazil, because of our political system, because of illiteracy rates or whatever. So we tend to go into the tech pessimism again. How to make people believe that digital democracy can actually exist in a collaborative and plural way, that we can still turn things around and have a better work with technology in democracy?
Yeah, start small, right? I mean, Finland last year did one of the largest polis consultations with almost 1 million votes, so very, very large. They even broke the polis system because it was not designed to handle this many inputs. They're quickly fixed. But before doing that, they tried for a long time in a county level, so like in a very small jurisdiction. And it's not done as a referendum or anything. It is just like a quick poll, a wiki survey. And the result, the report, is just read before each city council meeting, and it's just that, right? So in this very shallow participation, the binding, the pre-commitment is so low that no councillor will be against it. It's just like running a poll for free before each council meeting. Why not, right? And then eventually, as people grew to be familiar with this technology, it is then used to decide things like healthcare and so on in small counties. And then after a year or two, when the entire nation become more accustomed to this topic, then they finally launch this large "What do you think, Finland?" Thing, again, before their election, so that everybody can see, although the trust in Finland between people to the institution is very high, what are the potential damaging points? What are the X, Y, and Z 5 years down the road that will make people feel that democracy is not worth it? And so by running this experiment, they actually found something, I think, quite profound. They found that the younger people, although they still trust the institution, they don't trust in their ability to influence the institution compared to the older generation. And the older generation, the main division, the main worry was that some words they could use, they grow up using. Nowadays, many young people become angry when they use those words. You cannot make jokes anymore about some people, and right. So there's a word policing going on, and they're quite uncomfortable with that. But then young people think you should change the way you use words anyway, right? So that is one potential divide that they need to address using the bridge that was identified by the police on intergenerational mutual learning and things like that. So I like the Finland example because they did not wait until the polarization was there. They did like horizon scanning to see what polarization will be there in 3 years or in 5 years, and then they take proactive action. But that, I think, become possible because they do not shy away from like 300 people or even 50 people trying out in a very, very small area. So small d democracy, I think, is a good antidote against the pessimism. Because if you start with 23 million people, people will say it's not possible. But if it's just 23 people, here we can do it, right?
I think pessimism is you're not going to like what's coming. Optimism is you're going to like what you're going to get. And both of these are kind of authoritarian and exclusionary and deny people their agency. And I think that's the natural thing that happens when the only people telling positive tech stories in the press, and the press is more responsible in my mind than anyone for this. Because of course there's people like Oreo Kolomoangi, there's people like Audrey, there's people like you doing the work. But the only stories in the press are the atheist white guys in Silicon Valley. That's the only story that's out there. Even if that's not the work they're doing, even if the engineers are, that is the story they like to tell. And we have to resist the narrative of the white hero dude in Silicon Valley does the work and the black woman complains. That is the story that they always want to tell. And we need to fight that. We need to tell the stories of different people making the future. And that's what we are trying to do with this work. Because when people feel that people more like them are doing the work, when they feel, as in MaraiCon in Japan, welcomed into the process of planning the future, then it's not about optimism or pessimism. These are both disempowering. It's about steering. It's about my agency. It's about, if I don't like the way it's going, I better do something about that, And that's when you have the chance to really feel empowered. Because it's not about, is it going well, is it going badly? It's about, do I have a role to play? Can I find meaning in this? And can people like me be part of it?
Essa deve ser a nossa última pergunta oficialmente, mas para quem quiser, a gente pode ficar mais uns minutinhos. Então, vou passar aqui para você.
Hi, I'm Carla Bezerro. I'm Director of Digital Participation here in the Brazilian government. And it was very enlightening to hear all your... It helps us to think outside the box about how to do things. But I would like to ask you a little bit more on the experience and specifically on the challenges that you faced and the the challenge that you could not surpass. For example, I saw the budget experience, and I would like to know if it was just about supervision, transparency, or if you had the chance to actually decide on where the budget would be implemented. And I'm asking this to think more broadly on participation. So we have many ways of participating. We can do collaboration, we can decide on consensus, and there are some points in which we have to actually vote and decide. So I would like to hear more about the Taiwanese experience on these different ways of participating.
Yeah, thank you. It is true that participatory budgeting in Taiwan never exceeded the city level. So we still have good PB in Taipei City and so on, but it never went to the national level. And there are many, many reasons why, but mostly because the central government and the city government are constantly fighting about budget. And the city government using participatory budgets can justify their budgets much better to the central government, but the central government does not have the same incentive to run participatory budgeting because the central government would love to keep most of the budgeting to themselves. Anyway, it is actually one of the constitutional conversations Taiwan is having right now. And so, I mean, of course, participation needs transparency, but transparency doesn't always result in participation. We all know that. I would say that, though, the lowering of the cost of participation is playing a very good role in convincing the bureaucrats, the career public service, because they do see participation as something that reduces the risk of a U-turn later on, right? But if it's costly in the sense of wasting their time, in a sense of too much noise, not many signal, if they have to work extra hours to absorb the input and so on, then maybe the trade-off is not worth it, right? You spend so many time, but you just reduce the risk by 2%. It's not a good trade. So here, I think the point is not to force even more multiply on risk reduction. We both know it's not easy, but rather on decreasing the cost. So for example, in the most recent example, we sent 200,000 SMS to random number in Taiwan using the government SMS number 111. So people know it comes from the government. And containing in the SMS is a survey. So again, people can set their agenda. And the question we ask is, how do you think about information integrity online with the AI deepfakes and cheap fakes? What do we do on social media? So this is a very broad question. Now, in the previous battle days, to have a consultation with 200,000 people would be a lot of cost. But now, because of advanced AI models, because of mini public, we can choose 450 people randomly that represent a microcosm of Taiwan. And as I mentioned, when they talk in 45 rooms, it doesn't cost anything because the facilitation is automatic. And so then to the public servant, it is not much cost. They get a very nuanced report automatically. They can afford to do this every weekend if they want. And for the participants, it's very fulfilling because their summarized reports are no longer constrained by the facilitator's biased understanding. The best moderator will still leave some details out because they don't know the lived experience. But this time, the compression is lossless. You can always go back to who said what in which room, thanks to AI. So the best 85% or more consensus was very nuanced and ratified into law immediately, like in 2 weeks. And then OpenAI, Microsoft, Meta, Google, they all said, okay, what people said is reasonable. And so it's now in the parliamentary floor, and this crowdsourced law will probably become law in 2 weeks from now. And so this very short timeline and this very lowered cost, it may be only decreased risk by 1% or 2%, but it doesn't matter. If it's inexpensive enough, then the bureaucracy can support you just by reducing the risk a little bit. That's my personal experience.
Bom, a gente chegou ao final oficial do nosso evento. We are at the official end of our event. So first, I would like to thank everyone. And if you need to leave now, you're welcome to leave. But we will stay here for a couple more minutes if you want to ask a few additional questions. So, yeah, we do have food. Would you like to take a quick break? A 5-minute break? Grab some food? And then... Perfect. Yeah, so just feel free to do what you need to do. And if you have more questions, they'll be happy to answer. So I know you have one. I'm sorry, I forget when eu esqueço quando eu estou falando português ou inglês.
Well, I would just like to say that in Brazil we have fact-checking, of course, as everybody else, and it's done by our Superior Electoral Court as well, and so it's named Facts and Rumors. So the government, the justice, because our electoral justice is a little bit different from the other justice, because we regulate, we have a consultative participation, and they judge, of course, the processes about election. So we have this mechanism of participation, so people can say as well to the justice, and they do this very simple, in a simple way in the site, just explaining what is not credible or what is true. But what I would like to know, if in Taiwan you have any kind of digital education from school to high schools, and I would like to know this as well from Glen, because in Brazil we are trying, we're a long way back, we have a long way to go, and I think this is one of the keys of solving this problem about disinformation, because as you said, prevention is better than after the, it's very difficult to resolve.
I would argue it is not the checked facts that protects people. It is the act of going through fact-checking that inoculates people. It is not about the truth. It is about the journey to discover truth together. And for anyone who have been on the journey, they become much more resilient in their mind against polarization. And so in 2019, we changed our entire curriculum. We took away the word literacy from data literacy, media literacy, digital literacy, whatever, because literacy is when you consume. We changed that to competence, data competence, media competence, digital competence, because competence is when you produce. And we make sure that the students are judged, are ranked not by how well they receive information, but how many contributions they make to the commons. So like designing a new font together with the open source community, that counts a lot. And even if they're just primary school, they can measure air qualities together using Raspberry Pi, using Arduino, and so on, and upload to distributed ledgers so they can go back to their parents saying, you probably don't want to go hike because the PM 2.5 level is too high, and so on. So in a sense, the sense-making needs to start very young. And once they find some injustice, as when they go to high school, they always find a lot of injustice, there needs to be a way for them to channel that energy. So instead of going to strike on Friday or something, there are e-democracy platforms where there is no age limit. So our citizen initiative join platform, some of the most successful ones, like banning plastic straw from bubble tea takeouts, or allowing the high school student to sleep for 1 more hours by starting the class later, and so on. These are all thousands and thousands of signatures by the young people younger than 18. And the civics teacher actually encouraged them to start such citizens initiatives. And when they do the deliberation, they have to face the stakeholders, like the people who actually make this plastic straws, and so on. And that is very educational. And so when they participate in the fact-checking as part of their class, and they see that if they correct the 3 presidential candidates during their debate, their name would appear on national TV, and so on. There are a lot of channels for their journey into sense-making together. And so when they turn 18, they think democracy is something, they have agency, they are on the steering wheel. But if you keep telling them, oh, you're too young, you cannot contribute, then by the time they turn 18, they become very cynical when it comes to democracy. So I totally agree, especially between age 12 and 17. This is critical to make sure that they have full competency in their education.
Obrigada, Audrey. Mais alguma pergunta? Certeza? Então tá bom, pessoal. Muito obrigada pela presença de vocês todos hoje. Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Glen. Thank you, Audrey. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for the great questions. Thank you.
Yeah. We will, the Wilson Center for Brazil Studies will be publishing a report based on these conversations and questions and exchanges that happened here. So we'll be in touch with you about that soon. And we're always open to hear from you, your ideas, questions, and experiences. As me and Glen said, the Plurality book is open, so you're all invited to co-author this story with us. And our experience in Brazil has so much richness to it, so we can also make a good contribution. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.